The trade deadline is fast approaching, and one team that is very likely to be active as we get closer to the final date is the Los Angeles Lakers, a team currently in panic mode after struggling a lot more than anticipated to begin the season. As of when recording this video, LA sits outside the playoff picture in the Western Conference, residing in 9th with a record of 21-22. Though to be fair to them, they are only half a game outside the top 6. Regardless though, these major struggles are concerning for a team thought to be one of the best teams in the league before the season began. So, in an attempt to turn this disaster of a season around, it is expected that some moves are going to be made in LA, especially with a guy like LeBron at the helm. So, in today's video, I'll be discussing some players potentially on the trade block for the Lakers currently, how realistic it is that they get moved, and finally, some trade package ideas that the Lakers may consider for these players at the deadline. Before we start, if you're new here and enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe for more NBA content like this. I'm trying to reach 18,000 subscribers and we're like 20 subs away from that goal, so all support would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, with that being said, let's talk about the Los Angeles Lakers. Firstly, let's take a look at the players on the trade block for the Lakers. The player that seems to be in trade talks a lot, or at least is a player a lot of Lakers fans want to see traded, is Russell Westbrook. As unrealistic as a trade involving Russ may seem, a lot of people believe that Westbrook is the problem and want him traded at the deadline. This is mainly due to Russ's inconsistent performances and overall underwhelming play throughout the season, currently averaging 19, 8 and 8 on 44% shooting from the field and under 30% from deep, which is especially concerning for an already poor shooting Lakers team. Westbrook has been amazing in patches this season, including a stretch of 5 or so games where he was averaging above 25 points with shooting splits of 50% from the field and 45% from deep. But as you all probably know, he's been equally bad in other patches of the season too. So, with this sporadic play and lack of positive impact at times, should the Lakers trade Russell Westbrook? And is it even realistic to try to do so? When it comes to trading Russell Westbrook, the biggest problem is obviously his contract. With such an enormous title of money next to his name, it makes it difficult for a lot of teams to get a deal done. For that reason, the Lakers may decide to keep him around rather than panic and make an irrational trade. Westbrook can also be a big X factor. As bad as he's been at times, he's also provided a major spark for them at other times, with his aggressive playstyle sometimes paying off, like we saw against the Jazz. Who knows how often we'll see that play come the postseason, but it is an upside that the Lakers may prefer over any asset that they can get for him. In the end, while Westbrook hasn't been what the Lakers were probably hoping for when they traded for him last offseason, I think he's still been a very important piece to the handful of successes that they've had this season. So, overall to me, while the idea of a Westbrook trade may satisfy some Lakers fans' desires, it's probably an impulsive, poorly thought out idea that would do more bad than good in the long term, especially considering that Westbrook's trade value is at an all-time low. If there's another star level player on the table, someone that can be a more reliable third option behind LeBron and AD, then maybe the Lakers do it. But I highly doubt that LA finds a deal like that. So yeah, I don't think the Lakers should trade Russ, and according to reports from Woj just a few hours ago, it seems like he may be off the table anyway. A player that is far more likely to be on the chopping block this deadline for the Lakers though is Taylon Horton-Tucker. People were expecting big things out of THT, and since he's been pretty mid during a lot of games this season, many believe that moving him elsewhere for a more impactful contributor is a good idea. I kind of agree with that sentiment, as I think Tucker's value on the trade market will be high enough to land a solid role player that the Lakers are interested in, such as a Miles Turner, Jeremy Grant, or Karis LeVert. Speaking of Miles Turner, as of when recording this video, the Pacers are willing to trade Miles Turner for a couple of first round picks and maybe a good young player in there as well. And that is definitely something that the Lakers can provide. In my eyes, a deal could look like a Lakers future first round pick, plus Kendrick Nunn and THT for Miles Turner, and I personally think that works well for both sides. Focusing on the Lakers, Miles Turner is a stretch big, so his shooting abilities will be crucial to helping the Lakers turn their poor shooting woes around, arguably their biggest weakness thus far this season. He's also a solid interior defender, so he'd be a good backup for AD, or at the very least, be able to fill Davis's void whenever he's injured, which seems to happen pretty often. The Lakers could utilize Tucker in other trade scenarios too though, not just with the Pacers and Miles Turner. Jeremy Grant of the Detroit Pistons is currently considered available at the moment in Detroit as they look to make Cade Cunningham the go-to guy. So with THT, I think a package of also a future first round pick, Kendrick Nunn, and either Malik Monk or Austin Reeves could get a deal done for him. Grant is one of the best two-way wings in the league, and his defense is going to be a huge boost to the Lakers if this trade ends up happening. His ability to space the floor is good too, and in a reduced role in LA compared to what he is in Detroit, I'd expect him to be a lot more effective with his touches than he has been at the Pistons. As much as Grant wants to proclaim himself as a number one option, he just isn't that. So a lesser role on a contending team, similar to what he was like on Denver, would make him a lot more impactful and help the Lakers in a big way potentially. Overall here, I think the Lakers should absolutely try and trade Taylon Horton-Tucker at this deadline. I think they can get a solid amount out of him, and he doesn't really fit the timeline of this team. As with LeBron at the tail end of his career, it's all about winning now. There are players on the trade block for other teams right now that can make a bigger impact for the Lakers, and considering the dire state this team is in, some changes need to be made to find that better impact player. That means trading THT to me. He's not at that impactful level that the Lakers need him to be. So I think his time in Los Angeles is up. This doesn't mean trading him for the sake of it though. This is more about moving THT for an upgrade over him, like Miles Turner, like Jeremy Grant, even a guy like Caris LeVert if possible. The Lakers need to be really smart with their moves at the deadline and not panic into some regrettable deals, because otherwise it's hard to see them turning their season around. Again though, with the struggles LA has had this season, there needs to be some form of change before they enter the second half of the season so they can turn things around. Trading THT as well as some other pieces for a player like Turner or Grant is what I believe they should do to accomplish that. Overall though, this is what I think the Lakers should do at the 2022 trade deadline. The big problem with the Lakers so far this season is their lack of a consistent option behind LeBron as well as their shooting. Westbrook has failed to be that consistent option through the first half of the season. Anthony Davis as well, but he's been injured a lot. But a trade for Russ in particular seems difficult to pull off anyway, and wouldn't really be that beneficial considering what they're looking to get back. Plus, Westbrook actually has been good at times this season, as little as that can be talked about, and has X-Factor tendencies, so to move him off would be too hasty in my opinion. I still think he does a lot of good for LA. However, a trade does need to happen for the Lakers. This roster isn't working as it was intended to. So I think by setting up a package centered around Taylon Horton-Tucker with some other decent assets like Monk, Reeves, Kendrick Nunn, etc., the Lakers should be able to pursue a guy like Jeremy Grant or Miles Turner and bring them in. Both of those guys, whoever they try to land, will bring consistent two-way basketball to the crib and provide LA with a much needed instant impact that can start to turn their season around. As it stands, there is an over-reliance in Los Angeles on LeBron James, especially lately with Anthony Davis constantly going down with some form of injury. That over-reliance is just not going to work anymore, so the way this roster is constructed needs to change ASAP, plain and simple. Trading for a guy like Jeremy Grant or Miles Turner will be able to fix that at least somewhat. And that will conclude the video. What do you guys think of this? What should the Lakers do at the trade deadline to you? Should they trade Russ? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave it a like and subscribe. But with that being said, I am out. Peace.